What just happened in South Korea is one of the most reckless political moves in modern history. As we may all know now, on December 3rd, President Yoon declared martial law, closed the National Assembly, and sent the military to enforce it. This marks the first martial law in the history of the Sixth Republic since its establishment in 1988, and the first martial law in 43 years since the last one ended in 1981, which was under Chun Doo-hwan, a military dictator who took power after a coup d'etat. So how did this happen? What went down? And how did the people respond? What does it all mean? And what comes next? So let's break it all down. So first, the why. In his declaration of martial law, he stated that his justification was rooted in his frustration with the opposition-controlled National Assembly. He accused the parliament of paralyzing his administration by impeaching government officials, most recently his defense minister, and blocking budgets, including those for the military and police. Yoon claimed that there were anti-government, pro-North Korean elements within the assembly that are working to destroy the country from within. And this rhetoric isn't new. It's a classic conservative strategy in South Korea to tie opposition movements, especially if it's even a millimeter left of center, to North Korea or communism. The elected opposition, the Democratic Party of Korea, has held a majority in parliament since 2020, and despite Yoon's 2022 presidential victory, his People Power Party hasn't been able to gain control of the National Assembly. After the 2024 parliamentary elections, the opposition maintained the majority with 170 seats out of 300. So essentially, he called martial law because he doesn't like what the elected opposition is doing with its majority in the National Assembly. Yoon's martial law declaration came late at night, 10:28 p.m., likely because they wanted this to go under the radar. This is corroborated by how the government didn't send out text alerts, something that usually happens when nationwide incidents are occurring in Korea. Within an hour of the declaration, the military, particularly the 707th Special Forces, were deployed to the National Assembly. Now, why the National Assembly? Well, under Article 77, Section 5 of the Constitution, if a majority of the National Assembly vote to end martial law, the president is required to accept. So this was what Yoon was trying to prevent from happening. He wanted to block members of parliament from gathering at the National Assembly to be able to activate this law. At the time of the declaration, there were people inside the National Assembly building, various staff, as well as members of the National Assembly. They immediately sprung to action, barricading themselves inside with anything they could find, including desks, chairs. They formed human walls, used fire extinguishers to repel the soldiers that had arrived via helicopters. While that was happening inside, outside, word spread quickly despite the late hour, and hundreds, eventually thousands of ordinary citizens rushed to the assembly in order to block the soldiers from sealing the building off from the members of the National Assembly. In this chaos, the members of the assembly were trying to get in any way they could. There's now the famous footage of the opposition leader Lee Jae-myung jumping over the fence to get in. And in fact, that is how many of the MPs got through. Not only that, people were helping them get up on the fence and over. But also, I want to mention how hesitant the soldiers were to use force, how they just didn't follow through with their orders. For instance, not a single shot was fired that day, not a single shot, even when one of the members of parliament, An Gi-ryong, was grabbing a soldier's gun by the barrel and was pulling on it. Also, they knew that the members of the National Assembly were trying to go over the fence to get in, but they didn't stop them. Many times, whenever the soldiers would make physical contact with civilians, they would back off. And this is when their first priority mission was to stop the members of the National Assembly from getting through. So thanks to the citizens, as well as the quiet quitting by the soldiers, 190 MPs, well above the majority needed, managed to convene at the National Assembly and voted to revoke martial law. Yoon was required to comply, and he announced the end of martial law shortly after. As expected, the next morning, 6 parties, including the official opposition, formed an alliance to file a motion to impeach him, citing his martial law declaration as a violation of democracy and an act of rebellion, among a list of crimes they accuse him of. Public sentiment is overwhelmingly in favor of impeachment, with over 70% of Koreans supporting it. Now, for impeachment to pass, they need a 2/3 majority, 200 votes, with the People Power Party, Yoon's party, holding 108 seats. At least 8 of them would need to defect. And the party immediately afterwards had said, while they disagree with the martial law declaration, they will not support impeachment. So they are, standing with President Yoon, which makes the vote a bit of a toss-up at the moment unless the People Power Party can be convinced into voting in line with the opposition alliance. Now, this is where I want to add, what if the whole thing was a ruse for another objective? That may sound crazy. After all, martial law is a hell of a distractor to throw in. But here's the thing. So within 2 minutes of the announcement, an advance party of soldiers went to the National Election Commission, seized the phones of all staff there at the time, and took over the premises. Think about it. It took an hour for the army to go to the National Assembly. For the National Election Commission, it took them 2 minutes, meaning they were literally waiting outside the building until the martial law declaration. Then additional soldiers and government agents began to arrive. Nearly 300 personnel were there, which was more than the number of troops they sent to the National Assembly. So why did Yoon send people to the Election Commission? This is something that Yoon has been obsessed with for a while, and it has to do with election fraud conspiracies in South Korea. Election fraud conspiracies in South Korea stems largely from the 2020 general election, where conservatives suffered a historic defeat. Lowest number of seats won by a major conservative party in 60 years, while the voter turnout was the highest in the history of Korea's general elections, 66.2%. And this was despite it being 2020 when people were on heavy lockdown. This was followed by right-wing YouTubers and media personalities fueling baseless claims of election fraud. But anything they said, the National Election Commission had a very reasonable explanation, or there was no evidence. And it's been commonly understood that this was nothing but YouTubers and conservative media trying to farm views and get money from angry conservatives who just couldn't accept the reality that they were given. And since Yoon has had difficulty with an opposition majority in National Assembly, he is prone to thinking these election fraud allegations are credible, which means he sent people to the Election Commission to collect evidence for election fraud. The now ex-defense minister later confirmed this. He said they went to the Election Commission to investigate election fraud. And judging by how swiftly they acted, it is likely that this was the true motive for why he called martial law. A lot of media outlets are now acknowledging that the National Assembly move was a ruse, and their true goal was to raid the National Election Commission, which is truly insane. I mean, just let that sink in. President Yoon called martial law to find evidence for election fraud accusations that were started by a bunch of right-wing YouTubers. Since then, Kim Yong-hyun, the defense minister, has resigned. All commanders involved have been suspended. Yoon has not said much other than essentially saying, I did nothing wrong. In terms of the impeachment vote, I think they're winning over the People Power Party. Han Dong-hun, the leader of the party, has since changed his mind from we cannot impeach him to Yoon needs to be suspended from his duty. So we're seeing a shift from the People Power Party because they uncovered evidence that the Yoon administration planned to arrest and lock up various politicians, including the leader of the opposition and Han at the base of the Capital Defense Command in Gwacheon. And the reason for why Yoon might have wanted to lock up Han is because while they're in the same party, the party is divided into two factions, one supporting Yoon and one supporting Han. Leader Han has added that it is worrying that the president seems to not acknowledge how grave the situation is and believes he did the right thing. So Han is concerned that if left in power, Yoon will do something crazy again, even calling for a second martial law. I mean, the only curveball that Yoon could legitimately throw outside of another military action at this point is if he reveals some findings from the Election Commission raid, and whether that has any legs to stand on, that could change things, but likely it's not happening. The election fraud stuff has been disproven numerous times, and there has never been any evidence. And regardless of that, Yoon is not keeping his job. He'll be lucky to not go to jail. Things are still tense and uncertain, but people are coming out in droves. They're marching, they're protesting, they're contacting their representatives. One member of parliament received over 4,000 texts in one day. So I think we can be rest assured to trust the Korean people to force their politicians' hands to do the right thing. Now, I want to end this whole thing on this note. This martial law ordeal was a testament to the strength of Korea's democracy, the strength of the Korean people. Yoon had a plan, whether to seize power or to find evidence for election fraud. Who knows what was going on in that twisted mind of his? But for some reason, he forgot that Korea is a nation that has endured and overcome decades of authoritarian rule under military dictatorships. They've won their political freedom through continuous civil movements, and through those struggles, Koreans built a democracy that is not only legally robust because they've learned from past dictatorships, but also deeply ingrained in the hearts of its citizens. When Yoon tried to use the military to seize control, it wasn't just lawmakers who stood up. It was ordinary people. Late at night, thousands rushed to the National Assembly to protect their democracy. People from all walks of life were there. Even the soldiers hesitated, and some apologized as they withdrew, reflecting how deeply the principles of democracy resonate even within those who were acting under the orders of the wannabe dictator Yoon. South Koreans have shown time and time again that they won't tolerate this, from the June democratic struggle of 1987, which ended decades of military rule, to the candlelight protests of 2016, which impeached President Park Geun-hye. Koreans have repeatedly risen to defend their rights. What we saw during this martial law episode was a continuation of that spirit, a nation that refuses to let any one person dismantle what they fought so hard to build. And that's the story I want people to take away from this, if anything. This isn't just a story of a failed power grab by a megalomaniac. And in fact, people should not even remember that guy. Screw that guy. Instead, it's a story of a vibrant democracy that thrives because of its people, people for whom democracy isn't just a system of government, it's a way of life, and how its people will always rise to defend it, no matter the cost and no matter the foe. Thank you for watching.